Welcome back to Great Life, Great Career. Here's your host, Scott Miller.
Welcome back, everyone. Our theme today is Outer Order, Inner Calm by the famed author and just really wise person, Gretchen Rubin. She's written many books, including The Happiness Project, Happier at Home, The 4 Tendencies, Better Than Before, and her new book, Outer Order, Inner Calm, Declutter and Organize to Make More Room for Happiness. Gretchen Rubin, welcome to Great Life, Great Career.
I'm so happy to be talking to you.
I mean, Gretchen, I read a lot of books, right? So I read about probably 200 books a year because through both programs and podcasts, I interview a lot of authors. Your book, The Happiness Project, has sold over 1 million copies. I mean, that is the echelon that hardly anyone ever hits. Why do you think The Happiness Project struck a chord in like over 1 million people?
You know, that is a great question. I think partly that, I was pretty happy when I started. And, and when research shows that across the world, most people are either pretty happy or very happy. Most people are pretty happy. So I think a lot of people could identify with being pretty happy with the elements of your life, but also seeing that there was low-hanging fruit, that there were things, simple things that even a very busy person could do as part of their ordinary life. You didn't have to drop everything. You didn't have to move across the world. You didn't have to spend a lot of time, energy, or money to find practical things that could make you happier. And so I think that was an approach that resonated with a lot of people, where they're like, it's not that I'm in a place of despair, but I think I could be happier, and I'm looking for some little ideas, manageable things I can actually do that could help.
I mean, your life has come full circle. You've now been interviewed by Oprah Winfrey and Scott Miller. Are you feeling that love?
Yes, it's exciting.
Because we're all on the same level there. So let's talk a little bit about Outer Order and Inner Calm. The theme today really is, I'm hoping that by the end of this hour, I'm much more calmer. My wife's not giving you much likelihood for that, but we're hoping I'm going to calm down a little bit. Why did you write Outer Order and Inner Calm?
Well, 10 years ago, as you said, I wrote The Happiness Project, and I've been writing about happiness and good habits ever since. And so I've been reading and writing and talking to people about happiness and habits and human nature. And I just noticed over and over something that surprised me. And it's that when I would talk to people about a lot of different things, self-knowledge, how do we read more, how do we connect more deeply with the people in our lives, all questions like that, people are very engaged. But when the subject was something like making your bed, people got there was an energy to it. There's an excitement to it. There's a weird buzz around everything related to organization, decluttering. It seems to matter more than it should, because we can all agree that in the context of a happy life, something like a crowded clothes closet or a messy desk is trivial. And yet over and over, people say that when they get control of the stuff in their lives, they feel more in control of their life generally in a completely disproportionate way. And it is true. Like a friend of mine said, I finally cleaned my fridge, and now I know I can switch careers. And I'm like, I know exactly how that feels. And so I was very curious about why we got this disproportionate boost from creating Outer Order, and then why it was, and then given that is the case for many people, how do we create it, and then how do we maintain Outer Order?
So, Gretchen, you're not a psychiatrist, but you're very smart, right? Yale Law School. You clerked for Supreme Court Justice Senator Day O'Connor. So that qualifies in my book to be really smart. What do you think are the underlying reasons for consumerism and materialism and collecting stuff? And what do you know, just from your research and your writing and interviewing, what are some of the base causes of why people like me like stuff around us, and then it kind of gets out of handle and out of control? And talk about that. Diagnose me.
Well, there's many elements coming together in your question. And one is, like you say, you like stuff. Well, one interesting aspect of people is some people are simplicity lovers and some people are abundance lovers. And simplicity lovers like bear counters and not much on the shelves and not much on the walls and, one little vase with one little rosebud. They like a clean desk. They like simplicity, and I'm like this myself. Some people love abundance, and they love profusion and choice and collections and a lot going on and piles of things that fire their imagination. They like a lot more things. Now, is one way right and one way wrong? I don't think so. I'm a simplicity lover, and that's what works for me. But I see that people who are abundance lovers in many ways are, they have pleasures that I don't have, and I enjoy being in those environments, even though I wouldn't want to live in that environment or I wouldn't create that environment for myself, but I can admire what they've put together. And so I think part of it is just like, I think sometimes people are like, well, you people would just be happier if you got rid of everything. It's like, maybe not, because maybe they're different from you. Not everybody wants a capsule wardrobe. Some people do. Some people don't, and it can become a problem if, like, I'm your boss and I say, a cluttered desk means a cluttered mind. We're going to have a clean desk policy in this office. Well, that works for me, but that might not be how someone else does their best work. Clutter is stuff that's just in your way. It's clogging the system. It's the cord to the appliance you don't have anymore. So I don't think anybody wants clutter, but some people do like a lot more level of things. And so you may be an abundance lover, and I think that's great. Now, when you talk about consumerism and materialism, I mean, one thing is it's just a natural aspect of human nature that people like things. And even people go way back in history, or even people who have very little extra, maybe no extra, they will still choose to do things like decorate their homes or buy things that might be considered luxuries. There's that line from Shakespeare, a reason, not the need. This is part of human nature. And what's happened now is many things that used to be quite expensive are now affordable. And so it might be that you used to not go out and buy lots of clothes because it was so expensive you could only afford to have 3 outfits. Well, now clothing is very inexpensive, and so it's kind of, for some people, becomes too easy to buy, and this is why if you're like an impulse shopper online, one thing you can do is like delete your account. So every time you shop, you have to enter your credit card information, enter your billing information, enter your shipping information to make it less convenient. Because when it's really convenient and not very expensive, well, then you might buy more than you need. And so you want to watch out for that. And so that you're not buying things that you don't need, use, or love, just because you can. Or then, like, people give you stuff for free. You go to a conference and they give you, do you want this tote bag? Do you want this journal? Do you want this cow-shaped pencil eraser? And you're like, yes, it's free. This is great. But it's like, do you need a tote bag? Like, I already have like 75 journals because I get a journal every time I turn around from a conference. It's like, okay, don't take the journal because you don't need it.
I'm wondering where these journals are, because I think I saw an episode in Architectural Digest recently that had a layout of your home. I think it was featuring you and the designer. And your home seemed very deliberate. It didn't seem like a minimalist home, but it felt very curated and intentional. Is that an insight into your life?
I try to be, definitely. I try to be. But I can tell you exactly where those journals are. I have a basket in what we call our butterfly closet on the 3rd shelf, and there's a basket there. And it's like anytime I'm like, do you need a blank journal? Here's the basket where all the blank journals that I got at those conferences. But now I don't take them anymore because that basket is full. We have enough blank journals to last us the next 15 years.
Gretchen, I think you're on the leading edge of a nerve that's striking a lot of people. Obviously, people know of the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. Tell me, why do you think it feels like right now, at least in America, that everybody is starting to realize, yes, they want inner calm, and we probably have too much stuff? Has something happened? Has there been a trend or an explosion or a tipping point where this topic is so prescient in so many people's lives?
I think it's a couple things. One is I think that people feel very overwhelmed right now with everything that's going on. There feels like there's a lot of uncertainty. It feels like you can't keep up with everything that's changing and everything that's going on. And I think people feel very overwhelmed by that. And one way of trying to manage it and trying to bring yourself back into equilibrium is to create more outer order in your own environment. So you're like, I can't control the world, but I can control the interior of my car. So I'm going to take the trash out of my car, and that's somehow going to like make me feel better. Again, it's not precisely rational, but it is sort of feeling like I'm going to control what I can control, and that's going to help me deal with the chaos that I feel like is around me in the outer world. And I also think that there's something happening demographically. There are a lot of people where they're in the season of stuff with their own children, so they have young children who have Legos and outgrow their clothes every year and have sports equipment and all that stuff. But then they also have parents who maybe are dying or are downsizing, and so a lot of stuff is coming down to them. So there's they just have a lot of things to manage. And that is creating a lot of issues for people because what happens with that stuff? How do you organize it? How do you decide what to keep and what to relinquish? And if you're going to relinquish something, what do you do with it? Do you want to give it away? Can you give it away? Can you sell it? Can you recycle it? How do you recycle it? Like how do you move it around? All these things are kind of coming at people from different directions.
Our guest today is Gretchen Rubin, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Happiness Project and the most recent bestselling book, Outer Order, Inner Calm. Gretchen, the book is phenomenal. It's super practical, right? I mean, this book, you can read it in an hour, you can tab it, and it's really enormously relevant. What are some of the ideas that you think are resonating so well with people in terms of those of us wanting to create a more serene, orderly environment, but we have a little bit of a compulsion to be a overbuyer versus an underbuyer? It's a term you have in your book. Talk a bit about what seems to be some of the most easily replicable practical tips in the book.
Well, I think a good starting place is the questions: do you need it? Do you love it? Do you use it? Because a lot of times one of the problems with creating outer order is that you have to decide what to keep and what to relinquish. And so how do you decide? I think, do you love it? Do you use it? Do you need it? Because if you don't love it, use it, or need it, it's probably like, why do you have this? This is like, 5 years ago, I thought it would be really great to give a rice cooker to my husband for his birthday, but like we actually never use it to cook rice. And so it's just been sitting on the shelf. It's perfectly good. Like somebody could use it all the time, but we don't use it. We don't need it. We don't love it. Like, but let's get rid of that. Let's get that into the hands of somebody who can make good use of it. So that's a helpful question, I think, for a lot of people. A strategy that really many people have told me has been transformative for them is the 1-minute rule. And this is the idea that anything you can do in less than a minute, you do without delay. So if you can hang up your coat instead of throwing it over a chair, if you can rip open a letter, scan the contents, realize you don't need it, and put it in the recycling. This is just a way to get rid of that sort of scum of clutter on the surface of everyday life, but you do it as you go. So you don't need to take a half an hour or an entire afternoon and deal with it. This is something that's just part of your daily life. It just keeps these things from piling up, because a lot of times it's not that there's anything that's that hard to deal with. It's just that looking out and seeing like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at my desk in the morning and there's coffee cups and there's pens and there's trash and there's papers and there's books and the loose paper clips. Like I just have to fight my way to my desk. Like getting rid of all that stuff just as you go, it just makes life so much easier and simpler. Now there's a kind of clutter, maybe you have this kind of clutter, which I would call anticipatory clutter or preparatory clutter. This is when people are like, oh, this could really come in handy this winter, so I think I'll go ahead and get this now. Or, oh, this would make a great birthday present, so I think I'll go ahead and buy this now, even though I don't have a recipient in mind. And if you have that kind of clutter, you can remind yourself that you can store it at the store. They will hang on to these things for you. You do not need to take possession of them just yet. You can wait until you need them. And just for now, store it at the store.
Gretchen, how do people buy you birthday gifts? I mean, you've invited me to your house for dinner parties many times. I'm kidding. That's not happened yet. How do people bring you a housewarming gift? It must be like this, horrifying experience for your friends to bring you a gift. Or how does that work? Come on, show us.
Well, it's interesting. I think people do tend to give me gifts less. It's funny. I was speaking at a library event. And I was talking about tote bags, because tote bags are like my kryptonite. I just love tote bags, and you can get tons of free tote bags. And I had to get rid of 2/3 of my tote bags, and now I'm really being disciplined about not taking a tote bag. And then they were after the talk, they came up to me and they're like, well, we were going to give you this. It's this very nice tote bag, but we know that maybe you don't want it. And I was like, it's literally taking all my strength not to take that tote bag. Help me step away from the tote bag. Yeah, so I think probably in margin people give me things less because I'm sort of but that I'm fine with that.
I think the Lululemon
gift giving is very complicated.
It is.
Yes, I've spent a lot of time studying gift giving.
Gift receiving is complicated, right? Do I take this? How long do I keep it? Yeah. I think Lululemon tote bags are taking over my entryway in my home. We have 60 of them.
Yes.
Gretchen,
well, this is something that bothers me with clutter. There's a kind of clutter where things are too good for what they are, so you feel like you should keep them and reuse them, even though you don't even really want them. It's like the bag is good enough that you could reuse it, but like I don't really need it, but I keep getting it. So the thing is, like when you go to the store, say, I don't need a bag, because otherwise you just keep getting, or like when you get a box and you're like, this is really a nice box. I should reuse this, but it's got the brand on it. It's like, it's too nice to just toss. And yet it's not nice. It doesn't really fulfill a need. I wouldn't go out and buy it. That kind of thing really annoys me.
Gretchen, take it a step further. How does someone know if they have a problem? Meaning, like, we all have clutter in our lives, except for Paul Walker, who actually vacuums his house multiple times a day, and nothing is in his car. It's so annoying, not even like a piece of dust. But how does someone know if they have a bigger problem, like they're a hoarder, or they've kind of imploding? Is there any kind of self-diagnosis or kind of tipping point where someone could say, you know what, I'm on a broader need than just decluttering my life. I have a problem.
Well, hoarding is a mental illness. So let's put that to the side,
Okay.
because that's something that for a mental health professional, there's
Right.
pack rats, which are like the people like, oh, my parents never throw anything away. Their attic is packed full. That's not hoarding.
Okay.
Hoarding is where it's really, that's like a diagnosis. It's a problem if it's a problem for you or if it's a problem for someone else who's important to you. So, if people are like, but for some people, they don't really care very much. Like, I have the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast, and every week I talk about happiness with my sister, who is a big TV writer in Los Angeles, and she's clutter blind. Some people are clutter blind, meaning it really doesn't drain her. It doesn't overwhelm her. It doesn't bother her. If she wouldn't close the kitchen cabinet door again as long as she lived, if she lived by herself, because she just doesn't care. And there's a small number of people where they just don't care. And I'm like, if you don't care and it doesn't bother anybody else, there's no magic to making your bed. There's no magic to closing the kitchen cabinet doors. It's just that for most people, outer order does contribute to inner calm and a sense of focus and possibility. If it doesn't do it for you, then you just don't need to worry about this. But for some people, it really matters a lot. And you might be in an environment where it really bothers people. Or let's say that you've been living in your house in the suburbs for 45 years. You've got your attic packed, your basement packed, your garage packed, your pantry packed, and like the guest room is packed with stuff. And now you need to downsize because you need to move to a different kind of place. Well, this is a huge problem because somebody's going to have to clean out that house. It's either going to be you or it's going to be somebody close to you. So in that case, it's a problem because somebody has to manage this. But if you're like, hey, I've got my home, somebody was saying to me, like, how do I make my boyfriend alphabetize the books in his office? It's driving me crazy. I'm like, I don't see why this is your business. You know what I mean? Like, if your boyfriend has his own office and he doesn't care if his books are alphabetized, there's no law saying people have to alphabetize their books. If it doesn't bother him and it's not an issue for him, it's not a problem that needs to abstractly be solved. So if it's not causing you a problem, and it's not causing a problem for anyone else, then then it's not a problem. Then it's just the environment that you like. But for many people, they would like to have more outer order. They do feel like they would be more productive, or they'd be able to find things more easily. Research suggests that the average American adult spends 55 minutes a day looking for misplaced items. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of time. Think of what you could do with 55 minutes a day. So putting things away, cleaning, finding things, for a lot of people, just having the open counter space or the open shelf space is calming. Getting rid of stuff you don't need, don't use, don't love it. It kind of gets these things off your conscience, gets them into the hands of people who can use them. There's a lot of gratification that can come from that. But like, should everybody, have one shelf of books and get rid of everything else? No, people are different. People want different things. So it's like, what do you want? How do you get where you want to go?
Our guest today is Gretchen Rubin, author of the new book, Outer Order, Inner Calm. You're listening to Scott Miller on Great Life, Great Career. We're going to take a break and come back. When we come back, we're going to have Gretchen talk about a couple of key concepts in her book around the broken windows idea. What are clutter magnets? And then spend some time talking about the 4 tendencies: upholders, obligers, rebels, and questioners. We'll be back in a few minutes with Gretchen Rubin.